Good morning and welcome to Introductory Logic Lesson 11. And we're going to be talking about one basic verb. Now, we're going to start working with standard categorical statements, which is what we use in the syllogism in order to test for validity. But before we can move into that, we have to first understand what a standard statement is and then a standard categorical statement. So today we're talking about the standard part of the statement, and this refers to the verb. All standard statements have to have a verb of being. And this is the first part of translating into standard categorical statements. So we're going to be looking at verb of being statements and how to take an ordinary statement and translate it into a statement that uses a verb of being. And as you'll see, when we translate these sentences, they sound really weird. And it's not how normal people talk. However, it does help us to analyze statements and their relationship with one another and to test for validity when there's a standard form and they all follow that form. So it's going to sound weird. This part of logic can be very frustrating and confusing, but just stay with it. And we'll try to break it down as much as possible because I think this is what I came across when I was going through this myself for the first time, is the more we can break it down into puzzle pieces and steps, the easier it becomes and to identify what those pieces are. So that's what we're hopefully going to be doing. So looking at this first, I have first of all, what are the verb of beings? If you are doing the Classical Conversations program and your student did essentials or foundations, a lot of what we cover in logic, in this form of logic and even Latin, uses a lot of grammar, and essentials went over grammar. So we're going to be pulling from that actually. So just to recap, and even for those who didn't do that, we'll be looking at that and help you figure it out too. So the verb of being that we're going to be translating and using in our sentences is am, are, is, was, and were. So these are our options there that we're going to be choosing when we translate these sentences here. All right, so the first one we're going to look at here is popcorn explodes. This is a very simple sentence. It has a subject and it has the predicate. Now, remember, a sentence has a subject, which is what the sentence is about, and the predicate is the verb and everything that's explaining what is happening to or about the subject. So popcorn would be what our sentence is about, and explodes explains what's happening to the popcorn here. All right, so if we're going to be using our skill here, which is translating into verb of being, first we're going to identify the subject, which we just did, and that is popcorn. That is our subject. Now what we have to do is we're adding a verb of being. So what we have to do is pick the verb that matches the sentence that's already here. This is present tense, and it's a singular. So the verb is present tense, and the subject is singular. So my verb is going to be is. Popcorn is. And I'm going to go ahead and put a right there. Now, here's the trick. What we're going to do with the actual verb in our original sentence is we're going to make it a noun. So if what you see a lot through these verbs is if you just, it doesn't work all the time, but when you add an ER to the verb, it makes it a noun. So is a, hold on, let me double check how the order of which. Okay. Is an exploding thing. Now that actually, okay, this is how the book had it. I'm going to show you what works. How it made it more simple to my mind is if I can find a pattern, and I'm going to use that. So this is how the book gives you the answer, which it works. This does work. But how my mind worked is by doing it a thing. Nope, that doesn't work. an exploder. That's where I was going with that. Sorry. All right, my mind is going in different directions here. So popcorn is an exploder or an exploding thing, however you want to do that one. All right, now let's look at this one. The man tap danced wildly. So first things first is we're going to find the subject. What is the sentence about? The sentence is about the man. So I'm just going to write the subject, and I have to use all the words in the subject. The man. Now I have to add a verb of being. Am, are, is, was, were. I'm going to match the number of the subject, which is singular, and I have to match the tense of the verb. Now, I'm just going to find the verb here. It's danced. Danced is past tense. So my singular past tense is was. The man was. That's adding my to be verb. Now what I have to do is to turn the verb into a noun. So this is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and add that first. Tap dancer. So what I did is I found the verb. I made it a noun by saying tap dancer. I don't know if you can see or read my handwriting, but that's what I did first. But we can't leave out any of the words when we translate these sentences. So I went ahead and did the verb as the noun, but then I'm going to go back and see if there's any other words I'm leaving out. Wild was a wild tap dancer. The man was a wild tap dancer. I didn't lose any of my words. I translated it, taking the subject, adding a verb of being, made the verb a noun, and then if you notice, wildly was an adverb that was describing the verb. But what happens is when you turn the verb into a noun, it's still describing, but instead of it describing the verb, it is describing the noun. So it becomes an adjective. So tap dance wildly is a verb and an adverb, and it becomes a noun and an adjective. So that's that one. She weeps dramatically. Again, first things first, I'm going to find the subject. She is the subject. That's all there is in the subject. Now I need to add the verb of being. It has to match the number of the subject. She is singular. So I'm going to be dealing with these up here. These are singular and these are plural. Weeps. What tense is that? That's present. So I'm going to use the present tense up here in singular. She is a. All right, now where's my verb? My verb is weeps. I'm going to turn this into a noun, and this trick I'm going to use adding the ER. And I'm going to add it over here. I'm going to leave myself room. So I took the verb, made it a noun, weeper. I cannot drop any of my words, so I have to come back and look at this one. So instead of it being an adverb describing the verb, it now has to be an adjective describing the noun. She is a dramatic weeper. Right there. All right. This one kind of gets into where it can get frustrating and confusing, and this is even one of the easier ones that can be frustrating and confusing. So let's look at this one. So first, we're going to find the subject. The subject is the wolf. Now we have to add a verb of being. We have to match the number of the subject. The wolf is singular, so I need a singular one up here. And 8 is the verb. I have to follow the tense. 8 is past tense, so I'm going to use the singular past tense for this one. The wolf was a. All right. Now I'm going to take the verb, and I'm going to make the verb a noun, which would be eater. eater. I did my trick where I added an ER. I took the verb, added an ER to it. Now I have to look back and see what I'm missing. So I have the verb and the subject, but I have this here. What did the wolf eat? He ate Red Riding Hood. Now, we had to change the verb to a noun. And so this has to basically kind of be an adjective, but it's a name. So this is where it gets tricky. So I don't have room to write Red Riding Hood, so I'm going to abbreviate. Red Riding Hood eater. And sometimes, a lot of times, they'll put dashes in between words if it becomes strange, and just to make it kind of look like more of an adjective. So the wolf was a Red Riding Hood eater. So that is an example of how we're using the verb of being. I'm going to erase this real quick, and then I'm going to put something else up here, and I'll be right back. All right, so I have an example up here. This is a weird one, and sometimes the book uses the very weird things to show how we can easily pick out the weird things as not being right, and sometimes that's easier to look at the reason why than to take something that's trickier and more or less obviously wrong. So this one's crazy, and we can look at this and say this is crazy and wrong. God is love. Love is blind. Ray Charles is blind. Therefore, these dots mean therefore. Ray Charles is God. Obviously, this is totally false. And we're like, yes, that is not right. But why is it not right? So let's look at this. Now, if you notice, they all have a verb of being, but the question is being used in the same way. Sometimes is can equal an equal sign. Sometimes it cannot. And it's important to distinguish when and how it's being used and which one it's using, because it will totally differentiate whether this is true or not. Now, if you notice, God is love. And this one, now again, this is true. This is an example of how things can be true, statements can be true, and they're not valid. They don't follow the rules and come to a completely invalid conclusion. This one I think could be into a theological debate, possibly, as whether how accurate this one is. But this one and this one is true. All right, God is love. Now in this one, love is renaming God. So the is, I'm going to say renaming. So in this one, the is actually can be determined, like qualified as an equal sign. However, love is blind. Blind is not renaming love. Blind is describing love. So this is actually an adjective. This is not renaming. This is an adjective. Going back to grammar and essentials, you learn that when it's renaming, it's a noun, and it's in the predicate, so it's a predicate noun. So this would be an example of a predicate noun. Blind is an adjective, and it's in the predicate. So this would be labeled a PA. If you remember essentials, a PA. So in this one, is followed by a predicate noun, which renames the subject. And this one is used to describe the subject, and that's an adjective. So is not used in the same way. In order to do our standard categorical statements, we have to have a noun in the predicate. So this one is the only one that would work out of these two in our standard categorical form, because it has a noun in the predicate. This one is wrong. This one would have to be translated differently. We would have to make blind, we would have to change that into a noun. How would we do that? Love is blind. What I could say is, I'm going to mark this out like that. Love is a blind thing. So I added thing there. And this is how you can do it sometimes, is just adding a thing, taking the adjective and putting thing at the end of it. All right, now let's look at this one. Ray Charles is blind. Does blind rename Ray Charles? No. He's not identified, like, that is not him, like him. It's an adjective. It's describing him, but it's not renaming him. So again, this would actually be an adjective, this would have to be retranslated. Now this is where it gets kind of weird. Because you have to use the same terminology. So we would have to bring this down here and use blind in the same way. Ray Charles is a blind thing. That sounds kind of harsh. But again, this is how you have to match everything, okay? All right, so that's an example of how you have to understand how is being used, what follows is, and there has to be a noun. It cannot be an adjective. If it's just an adjective, you have to add a noun to it. All right, so I'm going to pause again, and I'm going to get something else up here, and we'll continue. All right, so now we're going to look at translating to standard form. We kind of went over it. I mean, we went over it, but now we have actual identifiable rules. Oh no, the light is, let me see if I can fix that. Okay. The lighting in here is very terrible. I apologize. Okay, so number one is identify and write the subject. So we're going to be using a sentence. Let's see here. Let's see. My dog eats dandelions. I'm going to write that up here. My dog eats dandelions. All right, checking the time. All right, we have identify and write the subject. We're going to use this sentence here. My dog eats dandelions. What is the subject? My dog. Okay, so that's what we have here. Now we're going to add the to be verb. Remember, it has to agree with the number of the subject and the tense of the verb. Okay, remember that's what it has to do. So it's singular and eats is present tense. So it's going to be is. My dog, so I'm going to put this here, is. All right, number 3. I don't know how well y'all can read this. I probably will switch colors next time instead of orange. So number 3 is to rewrite the predicate as a predicate nominative. Now, the predicate nominative is a noun. So that's what we were doing. So we're going to look at the predicate. The predicate is the verb and anything that comes after the verb. So eats dandelions is our predicate. We have to re-say this, putting the whole thing as a noun. Remember the trick that sometimes works, a lot of times works, is to take the verb, add an ER to it. So that would be eater. Let me see if you can see that. Yep, okay. Eater. Now, I like to leave room in the front while I'm learning how to do this, so I can go back and add any word that needs to describe the noun. All right, so it used to be dandelions. It says that he ate or eats dandelions. So now that becomes what type of eater? A dandelion eater. It becomes an adjective. Dandelion eater. And sometimes they put a hyphen there just to show that it's a noun. It actually works to not do the dash in that one, but sometimes, a lot of times, they put dashes in there to show the craziness. It's crazy, but it's still making it a noun. All right, so these are our rules. To translate to standard form, you're going to identify and write the subject. You're going to add the to be verb. Then you're going to rewrite the predicate as a predicate nominative, which is a noun. Remember, not an adjective. If it has an adjective in it, you have to add a noun to it. All right, so that is it. That is all. So these are all, this is the example that I have. So if I were to, I'm going to bring this up here to finish it out. My dog is, and I'm going to add a dandelion eater. And that is it translated into standard form. So this was step 1 in translating regular sentences into statements that can be used in a thing called a syllogism in order to test for validity in later lessons. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. And I'll see you guys next time at the later lesson. Bye.